Good evening, everybody, and welcome thank you for joining us and welcome to IDE. My name is Dennis Weil, and I'm the Dean of the Institute of Design. We are very excited that you can join us tonight for our talk on Design for Equity, Chicago Fines and Fees. It's one of my favorite projects that we have done recently, and it was wonderful to do it with the city. And it also won an award with Fast Company. So it's a great collaboration. Quick few words about ID. Into Design, we were founded as the New Bauhaus in 1937. We are and define ourselves as a long-standing and pioneering collective of thinkers and doers that are focused on building purpose-driven, resilient, and adaptive systems. We work with leaders and learners and organizations and communities to rethink value models, to reimagine legacy structures, to reinvent systems and services, and to reinvigorate organizations. So we are in the transformation business using design to build more responsible, intelligent, cooperative, and equitable futures. It is particularly my honor tonight to join two leaders of Chicago who have joined us, City Clerk Valencia and Rosazlia Grillier, former president of COFI. We are very excited that you have joined our little school for tonight, and we are honored by your participation. With that, it's my honor to hand over to Christine Geeken, our Director of Content and Influence, who is the moderator tonight and who will introduce all the panelists in more detail. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So glad you could join us tonight. That's right. I'm going to introduce everyone here on our panel, and then we'll get started with our conversation. So first we have Ana Valencia, sworn in January 2017, the second Latina to serve as City Clerk of Chicago. As City Clerk, Ana has focused on making government accessible to all Chicagoans. Under her leadership, the Office of the City Clerk has made it a priority to find new and innovative ways to bring services directly to residents, increase civic engagement, and collaborate across government in the private and public sectors. Ana earned her degree in International Studies from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She lives in the Tri-Taylor neighborhood with her husband, their daughter, and their dog. And we also have Mark Jones. He is a service designer and visiting industry professor at the Institute of Design, focusing on service innovation and design strategy. He has over 15 years of designing service experiences with a particular specialization in healthcare that not only serve customers' needs, but inspire true long-term loyalty. And he has a particular passion for launching pilots using experimental design methods. We also have Rosazlia Grillier, who sits on 5 national governing bodies. She is co-president emeritus of COFI POWER-PAC Illinois, co-chair of the STOP, which stands for Stepping Out of Poverty. And STOP was the author of Stopping the Debt Spiral. She's a survivor and advocate for all things equitable, locally, statewide, and nationally, and she believes that there should be no decisions about us without us. And then we also have Jessica Grainger DeMeester. She's a design strategist working at the intersection of innovation, design, and business, helping leaders to discover new possibilities through human-centered methods. Driven by curiosity and better outcomes for all, Jessica designs sustainable solutions, acting as the bridge between human and business value. Just want to also note here that we are recording this session, and we have a Q&A portion. You can put questions for the panel in the Q&A section, which we will address toward the end of the session. And then there's also the chat function. But if you could keep your questions in the Q&A portion, it'll be easier for us to manage them there. So without further ado, I'll get started here. And Ana, I'd like to ask you sort of just to kind of lay the groundwork for us here of how this project came to be and how you thought to include design in the project.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on this panel tonight. I want to do a special shout out to Miss Rose, who really brought this problem as a community to me. and has been a true partner. And we've been on a couple of panels before, so it's always great to see you, Miss Rose. I love the rose in the background representing you. And to Mark and the team at IIT for saying yes to reaching out to us. I actually was introduced to design thinking and my Leadership Greater Chicago class. So Chris Rudd, who I believe is at IIT now, came to our LGC class and took us through kind of design thinking as these leaders across the city of Chicago and foundation, nonprofits, and government and corporate, really to think differently when you're creating policies and really putting people at the center of our policies. So when the Fines and Fees Collaborative started, it really was a, get rid of the silos, everyone come to the table, parents, community, department heads, elected officials, everyone who touched it, different stakeholders and academic researchers. We had a lot of universities step up to help. And when we were introduced to IIT, we actually came for another City Key, which is a different initiative that my office runs. And we met with students on a different project, and we just got to talking, and somehow it led to another of how we could have IIT come and help support our work. And it was great to work with the students and hear their perspective. So getting another fresh perspective and helping us really see from the user end and from the residents who we serve every day, what those pain points are and how could we solve them together through policy changes, through technology changes, through clear communication, really, untangling these wicked problems together. And so it's been a journey ever since, and I really enjoyed, there were some tense moments. We'll talk about some of those challenges and growth edges, but there was a lot of magic. And at the end product, we were able to help a lot of families, which was our end goal.
Fantastic. Ms. Rose, could you tell us a little bit about how you became engaged with the work here?
Yes, thank you so much. So COFI POWER-PAC Illinois has been working on these issues for over a decade. And as we were looking at closing the wealth gap and the reason that folks weren't able to build assets or were finding themselves in debt, to their detriment, some people becoming homeless and other very hard premises that debt and fines were causing, we started our surveys across the state to figure out what some of those things were. And that led us to the publication of our Stopping the Debt Spiral. And as we were talking to different policymakers, and I won't go through the list of names of folks that we reached out to see what could be done in a number of different areas that we had identified within the publication. And we went to an event, I think the WBEZ and ProPublica hosted, and the clerk was there and we had a conversation. And then she came to our office and we had a meeting and we started to strategize and talk about it. And we found a true champion in her. And she formed the collaborative, which called all the department heads together. And at that time, we were getting a new mayor and they got on board. And for the first time in my life, I've lived in Chicago a long time. Between New Orleans and Chicago, I grew up. And I had never seen, it was unprecedented to me to see all of the department heads. And I always complain about the silos and the disconnect and how we're not working together. But she was able to bring all of those folks together for the first time in my history to see people having these hard conversations and talking about what worked well and what didn't work well. And so that was just a great place to start and brought so much hope to me.
So can you talk just a bit about the collaborative when you refer to the collaborative, who's in the collaborative? Anna or Miss Rose?
Yeah, sure. And you can take up from here. I may not know all the details, but there were aldermen, there were community folks, there were folks from the various departments, Department of Finance, different stakeholders, researchers, just a host of people who should have always been at the table together talking about these issues. And there were a lot of misconceptions because we found that the way things are supposed to work for folks on the ground wasn't necessarily the way that they were working. So that was one point that we could think about. How could we bring answers to that? I don't know, Clerk, you might want to take it a little further.
Sure. So we also had University of Chicago. They're a big partner and have done some research for us. We had the Department of Transportation, Streets and Sanitation, Department of Finance, the Budget Department, the Mayor's Office, all at the table really talking, because each department carries a little bit of everything that was really contributing to the debt spiral. My office only had one sliver of it with the city sticker ticket debt, but we saw that other departments touched this as well. And to Ms. Rose's point, these silos really just had to be broken down. And there were conversations where they were intense. We had parents saying, to department heads, your policies are predatory and they are really impacting people in my neighborhood. And then we had departments that would say, be defensive about it because, they were trying to collect revenue, but then also had aha moments like, oh, I don't want to be that person. That's new. I'm a human. I don't want to do that to other people. And so we really got to the human aspect of seeing each other instead of talking past one another. And that has been a lot of work the last 2.5 years. I mean, it starts in fitzes, but it's really about building trust with community. And we had to ensure that any policies that were brought out, that our parents, our community advocates saw their fingerprints on the policy. Because if they didn't see the fingerprints on their policy or their ideas actually conceptualized, not just words, but action, the trust would go away and the policies would fail. And so that's the beauty, I think, of, working with design thinking and thinking about our users. It's really our residents and having them be the policymakers. They're the experts in the room. And I think often we forget to bring those expert lenses to the policy. And so they are really the policymakers and the experts. We're just really the ones that should be implementing and executing.
Great. So, Mark, can you talk a little bit about how the project came to you, and sort of the challenges that your class faced and how you saw it kind of encapsulated when it came to your class?
Yeah, so this project was a service design workshop, which is something that we do with partners all the time. So we've worked with the Chicago Public Library in the past, the Chicago Parks Department. But when this conversation happened with Anna Valencia and her department, we were really excited because we really sensed the openness to really using design. There was already a lot of enthusiasm for really attacking issues around equity with this project, and there was already a lot of evidence that there were a lot of issues to grapple with and to deal with. So when this particular project came along, I was just thrilled, and we very quickly, with the first conversation, went with, is this a possibility too? Yes, this seems like a great idea. I think it was a great fit from the very beginning, and I think it was because the department brought this openness, this excitement to use design methods. And so that it was a very good start and a great relationship throughout the entire project, where we checked in regularly and we had completely open access to the department. They shared, we were invited to these collaborative meetings. So from the get-go, it was a great relationship and partnership. And so we went through the entire design process, which is, we had to sort of educate them. What does that mean? It means we start with research, we come up with opportunity areas to make a difference, we come up with concepts, and then we prototype solutions and get feedback from residents in this case. And we went through a couple cycles of that. So we set this up as a workshop and executed sort of, and we'll talk about later about where we landed, but that was the expectations we set up, and it was a great start.
Great. So can you can you all talk about a little bit about the challenges of using design in the civic space? And maybe actually, Jessica, this might be a good time to sort of turn to you. You've been through a good amount of design classes now, and maybe you could talk a little bit about how this is a particular challenge to work in the civic space, or what might be different about this type of design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I realized in my intro, I didn't mention that I was one of the students on this project. So I was in Mark Jones' and I actually just graduated from the Institute of Design in December. So now I'm coming back as an alum, but thought I would just squeeze that in there. I would say from a student perspective, and also working within the human-centered design world and using our human-centered design methods, a big part of what we do is we go out and we spend time with people that are experiencing whatever problem is that we're trying to solve. And that in and of itself is a little more difficult in the civic space, just because you want to make sure you're being respectful of people's experiences. You want to ensure that you're not doing anything you shouldn't be doing in like public buildings. And we ran into just certain like privacy concerns. And then also when it comes to like, we built out a bunch of different prototypes and we wanted to really take the co-design approach. So like how Ms. Rose says, don't make decisions about us without us. We wanted to bring those into the field and spend time getting people's reactions and having them tell us like, what's wrong about this? How can it be improved? What would work better for them? And that was also just a little more challenging to go and find people, especially in public buildings and such. Having a little like prototype setup doesn't always go over super well. But it also was absolutely like the most rewarding project, and having the opportunity to be welcomed into people's experiences and people's stories when they felt comfortable to share. I just felt totally honored to have them trust me with their story and help it build to a better solution in the end.
And just to build on that, at the beginning of the project, the students took a lot of self-initiative and went on the streets, and they did intercepts with residents, and they sort of waited outside the offices of the city clerk as people sort of came out and just says, "Hello, we're students from IET. What was your experience like? What issues are you grappling with?" And they heard, like, they talked to almost 60 people. They heard, a lot of emotion, a lot of horrible stories. Some people who were angry, and then some people said, "I had a great experience." Of course, they got the whole range of things. They got, some people says, "Hey, I came in to get a job done, and they did a great job." So they heard the whole spectrum of people's experiences dealing with the city clerk and their fees and fines issues. And I think it was that foundation really, got them sort of really empathic, have empathy for residents, what their issues were. And I think that, Jessica was sort of describing, making sure we were listening to the residents about what their issues were, what their needs were. And that's the way they started.
Great.
I would just add one of the other challenges, if just from the government side, is that, to Ms. Rose's point too, like this hadn't been done before. So really trying to get departments to trust into the system, trust into the collaborative, and, lean in to be able to produce and change policies, which is not easy. There are, political issues. There are people who thought that we were, not going to raise any revenue. We're going to have this huge gap on our budget. And I really had to, the work that this all gave us as research was able to tell people this narrative, that that's a false narrative, that actually, people want to be in compliance. People want to, they're not trying to skirt the law, but we're not giving them a pathway to be in compliance. We're putting these roadblocks in. So I think one of the challenges is really trying to change the narrative and get people on board, and using a little, from my end, like political capital to get people to trust me and trust the process, and really just take the step towards, a pilot program or an amnesty month, or, just trying out these new policies. If they didn't work, we could try to find something else, but these new solutions did work. And we saw a lot of revenue not being lost, actually revenue being gained by forgiving debt, by a pathway to compliance, having an affordable option, having realistic payment plans. You actually saw money coming in instead of just debt on the books.
Yeah, building on that, what you said absolutely came through in our research as students, and finding that citizens and even visitors of the city were feeling more of this like punitive sentiment coming down from the government. And like a driving principle and force in a lot of our work was reframing the city as a partner and not out to get the residents, which is how a lot of them felt. And so that informed a lot of like the design decisions we made on like the payment plan, for instance, and making it just really cognitively easy to absorb, help people figure out exactly what they need to pay on time, and just like working in their favor and lowering barriers, even though that you didn't have to change much on the policy side. Like changing things on the design side made it so much easier for people to just make the right decisions, informed decisions.
So some of this, certainly a lot of this was about helping people to be in compliance more easily, right? I wonder how much of it, and sometimes these things fall together, but modernizing systems to some extent and ideas for that, again, make that easier for folks. And maybe too, Anna, if you could share any of sort of the ones that really spoke to you in terms of the options that students gave for solutions.
Sure. So, one of the options I really liked when they presented them was kind of like knowing your rights, like knowing your legal rights, how to challenge a ticket. Like not a lot of people know you could go to administrative hearings to challenge a ticket, or to take photos if the parking enforcement, if there weren't signs up when the parking enforcement came out. A lot of times residents are like, I didn't see the sign, or this, I parked here, and then the signs came later. But not knowing that you could do that, there was one solution that talked about like a chat box feature with like a lawyer, or like, could tell you could easily put text on the signage on the street, and you could text to like know how to pay a ticket, what the payment plans are, what your rights are to fight that ticket. I think there's a lot of confusion on that, that in a lot of the messaging doesn't get out to the ground level. And I know Miss Rose can expand on this as well, but I thought that was a nice feature. They also looked at places where people frequent. So let's say like dealerships or gas stations, and could you have that information more readily available? If you're buying a car, say, hey, you have to register your vehicle with Secretary White, and you need to go see City Clerk in Valencia for your city sticker. Or if you're going to get gas, could you have it, on a sign that's saying, do you know about your city sticker? Are you registered for a city sticker? So I thought those were some simple things that would help people know the information, and would understand, they would even know that you need to get a city sticker. And I know Miss Rose, you can expand on this more.
Yeah, absolutely. On the community side, I think the big challenge was these policies were contributing to so much detriment. People becoming homeless, and due to the license suspension as a result of these things, the inability for folks to get city jobs or other jobs because you can't have these tickets, but not being able to come in with a reasonable amount or have a clear pathway to even begin to settle this debt was huge, and again, it was leading to homelessness, even suicide, if you can imagine the depth of the harm that was being caused. And so, as Clark Valencia mentioned earlier, we weren't asking for a free pass. We were just saying, you know, allow people to take whatever that was wrong and make it right. And we can't do that if it's something that's unreasonable, and we can't do that if there is no pathway to be able to begin. And so one of the huge pieces of this for folks on the ground was, I'll just pull out one thing: making the payment plan for, especially for folks who are experiencing hardship already, that you could put $25 down to get started on this pathway. There was a young man the other day that we were able to help in this way. He had over $6,000 worth of debt, and he had been told so many different things that weren't right. And another part of this was Clerk Valencia made sure that the language was clear and that people could understand, and everybody's saying the same thing. People aren't getting 12 different pieces of information and never really being able to get started with this. And he was able to get on this plan, get a 60-month payment plan, which is something that no matter what, he can make his payments every month. And so now the city's going to get that money, whereas before there was no way they were going to get $6,000 from this young man because he doesn't have $6,000. But now everybody wins in this situation. Now, don't misunderstand me. We still have a long way to go. We still have things that we're working on now, even in the collaborative. And I'm a part of the national with the clerk and the mayor's office cohort to address some of these issues, like to stop doubling, and things that are really causing people from just being able to do what's right.
You know, just I want to add something to this, that you know, Ms. Rose was just talking about people who actually get into debt and how you can make that better, payment plans and things like that. But the students were also looking at ways to prevent people from getting into trouble in the first place. And what Anna was referring to, for example, you know, some people when they move to the city, or some people aren't aware that they have to get a city sticker for their car. And so that's where let's say, well, let's make sure that because they don't even think that they should go to a website to learn how to you know what they should do. So let's put them at car dealerships. Let's put promotions at gas stations so that we can create awareness where people already go, so they don't get the ticket in the first place. Or you know, the mobile lawyer idea, or you know, if you think that you want to challenge a ticket before it starts doubling, let's deal with it right away before something happens and you have to repair. So I think that the students' philosophy was, let's prevent people from getting into trouble in the first place. And by doing that, the city is going to show up as trying to help people, to genuinely try to prevent them from getting into trouble. And I think that authentic sort of approach, which is like, we're trying to help you from getting into trouble in the first place, really position the city in a better light. And that's what I think what the students were trying to do. And Jessica, I think that's what what all of you were trying to do in various ways with your projects.
Yeah, and can I also lift up that the clerk, so in another effort for that, because not everyone has computers, especially in financially challenged communities. So this idea of multiple ways to get the word out was really brilliant, in the sense that it considered those folks who are not usually considered. And then also she had the increments of payments. So you didn't have to come up with the whole amount. If you're experiencing hardship and you're not getting your city sticker because you don't have 100 and some odd dollars, well, let's do it in increments. So maybe you have $19 and you can get it, and then you pay for the next segment and the next segment. And you're not paying more, you're still paying the same amount. But again, it's creating a pathway for you to be compliant. a pathway for you to be a part of this and not get those additional tickets, because now you have a way that you can prevent even further harm.
Maybe you can speak a little bit to that, to sort of the types of solutions that were offered. I mean, certainly there were ones that were, using like chat functions and technology and that sort of thing. But I think also important to point out that this is, the solutions were fairly agnostic about whether or not technology was used. It was really just what is, addressing the issue at hand and what is the best way to get there. I think sometimes people can be surprised that really lo-fi solutions can be really optimal. Could Jessica or Mark maybe talk a little bit about that, about the breadth of solutions that were offered?
Yeah.
I worked specifically on the ticket roadmap. So it was a visualization to assist residents to understand what payments they have coming up, how they're broken down, any really important dates, like what date will the ticket start doubling, what date will the ticket start tripling, what date is their court hearing if they're attesting. And we proposed also having a texting service as well. So if someone wasn't able to log on in a computer, they could still be getting those updates as to like, hey, $19 is due this week, watch out for this date. Basically the debt spiral will start if the ticket starts doubling and tripling. We also thought about locating this tool at libraries or other kind of public buildings where people could use those shared resources and shared computers to look up their roadmap.
Yeah, and in addition, they were also making recommendations to put content directly on the tickets themselves, on signs and on streets themselves, so that people that without any technology at all could still get information that would help them make the right decisions. And so I think that it was there was almost like every channel. I mean, in most services today, it's almost like there's redundancy. Something on tickets, on signs, on a mobile channel, and on a website, and it's all of the above. And that's how you make sure that you're very inclusive, to make sure that everybody's included for whatever channel that they should or need to be on.
And can I also add, our ambassadors who were out there for early education and getting folks enrolled in Head Start, and those programs also there was a palm card developed as a result of all of this that gave 1, 2, 3 style instructions on how people could navigate this system and other things. And the mayor's office also published something right after that. But this was huge because we could go in communities that maybe didn't really have access to things before, and folks were on the ground making sure that those folks in those communities had access to a palm card that was a direction that could tell you exactly how to navigate those systems.
And building on Jessica, I actually totally forgot about the ticket roadmap, because that was huge. When we first started the collaborative, we did an in-depth kind of research of community roundtables. And what we also showed them was there was no ticket diagram. There was nothing that, and the one that I think we gave Mark and Jessica was so confusing and did not make any sense. And that was just the first time anyone actually wrote down the map of the ticketing process. And so if I didn't understand it and the community roundtables didn't understand it, we asked for their feedback on, where are the pain points again. And I forgot, Miss Rose, about the cards when we did the amnesty of like 1, 2, 3, how to buy you could buy a reduced term city sticker, which is, around $30 or so in installments. And then once you bought that, you could take it next month and get the debt forgiven for your tickets. We did that in October and November of 2019. And so I do think, that definitely helped with the ticketing mapping is huge. I think they use it still to this day. I know the Department of Finance and Budget in our office probably still uses it. We should think about resurrecting it again for our next round of improvements that we're hoping to do this year. because I do think this constant, to Mark's point, in all the channels, all rowing in the same direction, really helps us infiltrate the community, especially when you're a municipality with no marketing budget. You know, we have like, my marketing budget for our City Key municipal ID card is like $5,000 a year, you know, so no one knows about it besides word of mouth and your own kind of channels.
Could you, so actually, following up on that, could you talk a little bit about where the project, where you're at now with this, and what might be happening next?
Yes, so we are still meeting as a collaborative. You know, we had during this pandemic last year, almost a year ago, actually, to today, Miss Rose and the advocates really came to the city and said, hey, we're in this pandemic. We need your help. You know, we can't be giving people tickets when your offices are closed down and they can't get access to buy a city sticker because your offices are closed down. So we did a ticket moratorium. We did a city sticker ticket moratorium. I think it was like March until July, end of July. And that was all Miss Rose and the advocates really pushing the mayor's office and Department of Finance, and us helping to also, you know, advocate to get that moratorium. And then we met again around September. We kind of restarted up. The pandemic really kind of slowed us down, and but we got the collaborative back, and we're talking again. And we have a new comptroller that's coming to the meetings. We got everyone back and get re-engaged. And to Ms. Rose's point, we still have a far way to go. The pandemic has slowed government in a lot of ways. I mean, for my team, we had a hiring freeze and we didn't have capacity to take anything on, but to really get the normal services. But now we have some more capacity, and I'm really excited. And actually, Ms. Rose, you'll be happy to know that I talked to Rashma today, and I think there will be some very good news at our next collaborative meeting, because after our last practice, this practice, you mentioned a few things, and so I advocated that we needed to get moving on some action items. So you'll be very pleased, I think, at the 24th meeting. And really, I just want to thank Ms. Rose and the community for showing up. Like, they have showed up, they've trusted us, they've held us accountable, they've been directly and honest with us of where we need to go. And when you have a partnership with community that can trust you, that can have your back when things get rough, or can advocate or bring people along with you, that's huge. That's the only way this works. And, you know, hold us accountable to what we said we would do. I think that's also important. And we hold them accountable too, to give us grace and help us get these things done and over the finish line. So I'm really excited, and hopefully a year from now, we can come back with some more updates for you all. And I'd love to even bring up some of these ideas that we had talked about pre-pandemic when, you know, Jessica did her presentation, but I'd love to bring them back up to the collaborative and see if we can implement some of these.
Great. So we have just a couple minutes before we're going to get to some questions. So just want to start wrapping up. I want to ask, though, before we move to questions, just sort of how we might think about design and its role in government. You know, for instance, Mark, I know you come from, you know, the service design background, and so maybe you could speak just a little bit to like what that brings to this situation, and why design, you know, serves such an important role here.
Yeah, I think that when the students were looking at this problem, they of course started with residents and what their needs were, but then they started looking at who are all the departments that touch ticketing, that touch this entire issue. And it wasn't just the city clerk's office. It was, you know, people actually issuing tickets. It was the Department of street, you know, people doing signage on the streets. There were multiple departments who touch this whole issue, and that's what's challenging for cities. And I think that what design can do, because to really attack the solution in a robust way, we should think more holistically. So you look at the whole ecosystem, look at the various stakeholders, and then try to find solutions that bring them together in reasonable ways. In ways that sort of cut across the silos. I think that we started off this conversation talking about the silos in cities and government, and they're absolutely there because, you know, they're large organizations that have to deliver services reliably day after day after day, and that is an operations mentality that you have to succeed, to deliver reliable services, every single day. You have to have that. But I think design can bring another complementary way of looking at services that cross the silos, that think about from a user's point of view or a resident's point of view, and say, to succeed, we also have to think cross organizationally, rethink our operations. And I think there's a big opportunity in civic government to use design much more holistically, to sort of almost like turn systems upside down sometimes.
Great. Jessica, could you talk just a little bit before we move to questions, just about how, anything that were sort of salient that you learned from this project, or that you might even be using, today, now that you've graduated?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of going off of Mark's point, a huge learning. This was really my first experience. Well, it was my first service design class ever when I was working on this project. And it was my first time really learning about co-design and participatory design. And like, when you have a service, there is no service without someone engaging with the service. Like, you can make the sandwich, but if no one's there to buy the sandwich, it's not really a service. So learning about services in the context of the city was really huge for me to understand that, like, we can't just go and create something and deliver it. It needs to be co-designed alongside those that are going to be experiencing it every single day. So I, first of all, just felt really honored and humbled to be invited in to even engage in conversations and learn from everyone that we were speaking with, learn from Miss Rose, learn from her community. And that's something that has completely changed my practice until today and through today. And yeah, so that was one really key thing. Also, it really changed my approach to research. It was my first time really going through the entire research process and just understanding people's lived experiences and acting as that translator from, okay, this is what's going on, and now how might we build something that's going to alleviate the pain, alleviate the roadblocks that people are finding themselves hitting up against just because of the way that the system is structured. So through codifying the information and identifying those seen and unseen relationships, and really creating solutions alongside those that we were spending time in conversation with, is also something that has stuck with me in a really meaningful way and continues in my practice today now as a consultant.
Great. This is fantastic, and we have some really good questions too from our audience here. So I'm just going to jump into those. One that is really big and is important to talk about here, as we've sort of underlined, what happened in this project and how the ID, the Institute of Design, came together with the clerk's office to work on this project. And so I'd invite, each of you to sort of define for me what you mean when you talk about equity. So this person asks, people define equity in many ways. How would you define equitable design? It's a big question, but I think it's an important one.
I'll just start. I think that, to me, equitable design just means that it's a level playing field for every single resident, that every resident has an equal chance to succeed, with getting the services they need from a city and on terms that work for them. And I think if we start, for me, equitable design, equity starts with every resident and the variety and the diversity of residents, and thinking about there are different kinds of people, there are different needs, they live in different neighborhoods, they have different backgrounds. To me, equity, starts with that's acknowledging that we can't have a one-size-fits-all solution. We have to have something that really addresses the diversity of people's lives and where they live and their experiences and their lived lives. So that's, to me, and that's what I think design can do and does do, is to start with the acknowledging that people are different, they have needs, and how can we address those needs in real ways that are actionable and to make a difference.
And I love that, Mark, because government, we cannot look at that lens anymore. First of all, the people who constructed government didn't look like me. We weren't at the table. It was a very, similar voices, echo chamber, all addressing and trying to create things as one size fits all. And that's changing. And it's also recognizing that we all don't start at the same start line, that we don't all start at the same place. And we have different education systems. We have different zip codes and opportunities, if we're going to be honest, and different policies that have held a lot of us down. And so I think we have to recognize that everyone's not starting at the same starting line, and that's not fair. So to design thinking can create that fairness again, to what Mark has said. And I think that's acknowledging that first is really important. And then when you're creating these, designing, who's all there? Whose shared lived experiences and lenses are you looking through it, and creating it and holding space for them? And it can't be just, okay, they're there. They're there, they're empowered to use their voice. You're actively listening to their voice. You're actively listening and taking that voice, and you're creating it in, and you're bringing it to light. So that's really important to me as well. And I think that's why these conversations got heated sometimes, but it was a great thing because people could finally see each other and understand that there were so many inequities in these policies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Mark and the clerk trampled all over my answer.
Sorry, Ms. Rose.
But I'll say that equity is diversity. Equity is listening. Equity is the people most impacted helping to frame what the actual solutions are, because who knows better than you what you need? And so if we're talking about equity, it can't be a one size fits all. It can't be someone coming to tell you what you need that's ineffective, or running off with what you've said you need and forming it into something else. It's got to be respect for that lived experience. It's got to be putting the power behind whatever that role is with the lived experience of the person who's experiencing that challenge for a sound solution. So if we're to be equitable, we have to meet people exactly where they are at that time to help them get to the place that they're trying to get to. So it's about helping each person reach their desired goals wherever they start. And it's for them to frame that with us.
That's great.
That's what I found. I mean, bubbling up from all of your answers, that's what I found so powerful about this project, and what I find just so powerful about design research, as we call it. It's going and spending time with people, listening, holding space, hearing their stories, and allowing all of those voices that are typically marginalized, that are typically not represented, allowing all of those voices to be the inputs that then create something that was literally built for them. And that's why this project will forever hold a place in my heart as well.
So we have some questions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I say it's also listening to the challenges with respect and being fair in that, because oftentimes we find that things that are in place in Black and Brown communities aren't necessarily in place in other communities, which is what makes it feel predatory. Because if I have nothing and you're putting more on my back, but then there are communities that have so much and they don't seem to be challenged with these same things, then that for folks on the ground makes equity seem so intangible.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some questions that just sort of ask about this idea of equitable design in comparison to service design in general. And then one that also specifically asks about using service design in other scenarios, maybe similar scenarios. So Jessica Barnes mentions that she works at a bank where, they want to transform the way they charge overdraft fees to banking clients. And she sees a lot of parallels in the opportunity spaces here. So she has just kind of some questions circulating around this. How, when do we look in the mirror and say, are the fees themselves actually the problem? Are there ways to offset this revenue? Do we need to reimagine who we're charging because that's the right thing to do? I'd be curious to learn if this team examined the business models behind the systems enabling fee revenue. Any thoughts there? I know we had lots of questions about this sort of budget end of things here, like, okay, if we're not, if some revenue is not going to be gotten as a result of these things, then do you have to make up for that, or what happens?
Mm-hmm.
So can I quickly say to her point, I'm also a part of an initiative where we call for, it's a bank on project, and we call for banks to look at those very premises, to look at where they had predominantly in communities of color, more fees, more this, more that. And we got the banks that are involved in this initiative to sign on to remove those fees for communities that were already struggling and help them have better banking experiences. So just wanted to throw that out there, and I'm sure the research team has some more.
I think that banking is a good parallel to this, and particularly in fact that Anna Valencia said that some money is better than no money. There were lots of people that weren't paying anything on their debt, and with banking, and I have some experience there. There is some evidence that when you actually help people avoid overdraft fees and avoid these fees, they end up saving more. So the bank actually gets money in a different part of the bank. So you don't get the fee money, so that does go down. You have to, but you make it up because people respect the bank more, they're loyal to the bank, and they start saving more money at the bank. So it is sort of like, the money, it just adds up in different ways. It's not like, so you can't, that's why this cross-silo collaboration is so important for solutions, because if you just look at one part of a bank or one part of the city, then it looks like the numbers don't look very good. But if you think about the entire relationship with residents, it does look good. And I think that why it's so important to think a little bit broader for questions like this, because if you just look at one sort of like, balance sheet, it's hard to come up and create an argument for like, well, yeah, we're losing revenue. But if you look at the broader picture, it actually creates a much stronger picture for how you're building a relationship with residents and how that's going to achieve the city's goals in the long run.
I would also add on the banking piece that access to banking. If they looked to what Mark had said, people might save more because of overdraft, but like, who has access to banking? With the municipal ID, we can't get a lot of bank partners due to federal regulations to accept it as a primary ID to open a bank account. Think about how many people you're missing, how much money and transactions you're missing in that, because now they're going to currency exchanges or payday loan stores to get cash checking and paying a huge fee. They're willing to pay that fee there, but if you had a smaller fee at the bank, you would be getting so much more money and customers. So I think, we need to really look at our regulations and, why they are in existence. We always need a fresh idea. Just because we did something 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, doesn't mean it's the same reason we should do it now. We need to be asking these questions of who, why, access, all these important questions. In terms of looking at the city perspective, these are definitely conversations we had about revenue. I had this today, this conversation today about, okay, well, we have to look at the data. We need to see if we are going to lose 20 million on this, where do we make that up? Now, that is important because we do have to, pay for our streets. We have to pay, for things the cities need. I get that, but we should not be doing it on the backs of the most vulnerable. That is not right. And so we have to come together as a city and be real with ourselves and say, okay, where can we get revenue that's equitable? You know, take the fair tax. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, but that is something that needs to be rebrought again. You know, progressive income tax. What does that look like? Because that is fairness. No one that makes $30,000 a year should be paying the same as someone who makes $1 million a year. And so there are ways to do that can then fund, you know, help us get off those fines and fees. It was really political stunt of why we just taxed a little here, taxed a little here, because no one wanted to do a property tax increase. That's where we got into this mess. And we just have to be honest about that and say it out loud, and then say, okay, if we're going to be public servants in the future, what are we going to do about it? You know, we have to really be honest about ourselves. And so I do think there's ways where we're not collecting debt. It's just sitting there on the books. Let's do some debt forgiveness programs. Let's do something like a reduced term city sticker where people are buying compliance. We saw 80% of those that bought a reduced term city sticker at maybe the $30 mark in October of 2019. A year later, 80%, 80% of them stayed on a year later. So all the new registrants that fall, a year later, 80% of them stayed on into compliance. So that's another revenue generating that you're getting that you didn't account for. And so I do, like to Mark's point, we just have to think at different buckets of where that money's coming from, but it can happen. It just takes some courage to do it and hard work.
Right. So we only have a minute left here. So I'm going to ask sort of one closing question, which, you know, one attendee asks, was there sort of this, and you talked a little bit about this at the beginning, Clerk Valencia, but was there sort of a magic moment in which you sort of said, you know, it's really important to not do this the traditional way, that we be collaborative about this? And you talked about like what your reasons for bringing design in and that sort of thing. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about how design, in your experience, enables that collaboration that you thought was so necessary.
I think design makes a fair playing field. It can bring out everyone's opinions. Even, let's say you're in a room in a collaborative, right? And not everyone may want to speak up, may not want to offer, you know, everyone's different in the way they approach. But when you do these design sprints, you're able to take all of the experts and take all their feedback, and you really level the playing field. There's no titles. There's no, you know, Clerk Valencia and, you know, Miss Rose or the department head and the mayor. It's just really, I think, levels the playing field, and everyone gets to participate without feeling like, oh, did I say the right thing? Or, you know, really authentically in a way that's going to best serve the end product. And, you know, without bias. I mean, every person has bias, but as little as you can get into the end product. So I really, again, say it's just a simple way of saying putting people at the center of your policies. And that's really what we've done. And so that's, like, to me, that magic moment. I hope that government continues to do this. I said this to Mark and Jessica. You know, design thinking should be part of your curriculum in college. It should be in every leadership program that's offered to civic leaders. It should be something that government, you know, is trained on, that has grants to support. It should be offered to the community. It really should be something that we really make mainstream in government. We're always so late to the game on everything we do. You know, 4 years ago when I said design thinking or anything like that, people looked at me like I was crazy. And then I had Mayor Emanuel saying it before I left, and I was like, that's me. So I just do think that this can be it should be embedded into what we do.
So I'm just going to take that opportunity to note that we do have a dual degree program with the MDes and the MPA at the Institute of Design and with the Stewart School of Business at IIT. So just note that if that's the path that you're interested in. But any other final thoughts here about the importance of collaboration and how design adds to that?
I think that I'm hoping that Anna Valencia can be a real advocate for design with the city of Chicago. There is a trend in cities to really have a design office. The city of Philadelphia now has a service design group, which is started up, which is really working across the entire city. I think that Chicago is on the pathway to do that. And with people like Anna, being an advocate for design, I'm hoping that Chicago can mature to having it be an integral part of how services are designed and delivered to residents.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. This was a wonderful conversation, and really appreciated all these great questions too from the audience. We're going to post this recording tomorrow, and we will send it out to everyone who registered. And just go ahead and we hope you'll come back to our website, register for more events. You can sign up for our mailing list, id.iit.edu. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event, and one day back in our space on the Muse campus. So thanks again, everyone. We'll call it a night.